And what is a fast spin echo?
90-degree pulse with multiple 180s.
Okay, so what is, I know the difference between a spin echo and a fast spin echo is the multiple 180s, but what happens during the multiple 180s? What changes on a fast spin echo besides the multiple 180s? What do the 180s change from a spin echo? How? So what does that mean? What is the echo train length?
It's like multiple echoes that are, for every TR, like multiple lines of phase space.
Okay, but you said something about time. What about the time between a spin echo and a fast spin echo?
Well, the faster that's a lot faster.
Right. Why? Because multiple lines of K space get filled. Thank you. Correct. Let me correct. What else is specific that a fast spin echo does that a spin echo does not do?
Say it again, please.
What other thing does a fast spin echo differ? Something happens in a fast spin echo that does not happen in a spin echo, besides what we just said. Something else occurs.
If you use LTE, you're going to get blurry images.
The more 180s you use, it increases blurriness. Yes. But there's something else specific that I'm looking for, and it has to do with one of the parameters. What is the effective TE?
It will take the average over the.
Every time a 180, a new 180 is formed, the TE changes. It's close to what you've set, but if you set 85 on a spin echo, you're going to get 85 every single time. If you set 85 on a fast spin echo, you can get 80, you can get 86, you can get 82. You're going to get a multiple TEs, and then those multiple TEs, the system takes an average of them, and it becomes an effective TE, not a true TE. So what does TE control? So how does that effective TE come into play? How does that effective TE come into play?
Diminishes T1.
A fast spin echo, a spin echo, when you select, you're doing a T2 and you're using your long TR and your long TE, you're going to get a true TE weighted image, right? When you do a fast spin echo and you've got these effective TE or this average, it's not as true. It's still a T2, don't get me wrong, but it's not what we call a true T2. Does that make sense? Because of the effective TE. Now, we do fast spin echo for T1, for proton density, for T2. How does echo train length and fast spin echo affect T1?
A longer echo train length increases T2 weighting
Why?
because it says so on the screen.
Good answer. Well, think about it. The longer the ETL, or the more 180s, the more TEs you have to average. So that can affect your T1 weighted imaging because TE controls T2. So if you use an echo train length of like, all right, I went over this last week. If we're doing a fast spin echo T1, where should our echo train length be? Should be short. Okay? My rule, my personal rule is I don't go above 4. Okay, if I'm doing a fast spin echo proton density, where should my echo train length be? In the middle still 7 to 10, okay? Because remember, as we increase the echo train length, we're increasing blurriness. Why does it increase blurriness? Yeah, you're there. What happens when you're filling K-space? Multiple lines of K-space get filled, right? You get more filled at the wrong TEs, this is what causes, the image blurring. So the higher the echo train length, obviously the quicker the scan's going to be, the faster the scan's going to be, but those lines of K-space, you're going to get more of the wrong TE than you would close to that tight-knit, what you chose. Does that make sense? Okay. So spin echoes, 91.8. We're going to do gradient echo. We're going to do a whole review after we finish inversion recovery here. So I don't want to do it now and then for you guys and go through it all over again. So let's pick up where we left off last week, which we are about to start inversion recovery. Does anybody know anything about inversion recovery? That's what, a stir, that's one. That's an inversion recovery. But
Flare.
a flare, that's the other one. Okay, so inversion recovery is exactly what it means. It begins with an inversion pulse, a 180, then followed by the 90 degree. So it's going to start with the 180 inversion pulse, followed by the 90 degree excitation pulse, and then, depending if it's just a spin echo or a fast spin echo, a 180 rephasing. Okay, so when we're doing an inversion recovery, now we're adding in another parameter. The other parameter is called the TI, time of inversion or inversion time. Has anyone seen this on the system?
Stir.
What's that?
The stir.
Right, when you're doing an inversion recovery, when you're doing a stir or a flare. Has anyone seen where the parameter is for inversion time or time of inversion? It's called TI on your system, okay? Again, you guys need to start focusing, looking at these parameters, where they're located on your systems, so you know where to go to change them, okay? All right, so the time of inversion is the interval between the 180 inversion pulse and the 90 degree excitation pulse. Your TI or inversion time controls the amount of T1 recovery that is allowed to occur. Okay, so the most common IR or inversion recovery sequences are stirs and flares. Does anyone know what we use stir for?
Trauma.
Very good, very good. Compression fractures, right? Metastatic disease. Most places, stress fractures, most places use it routinely. Okay, we do, for spine, let's say lumbar spine, we do T1, sagittal T2, and a sagittal stir. Okay, a lot of places that's routine. When do we use a flare?
Right.
Why? Very good. MS Plex, we're gonna go through what stir and flare, what each one of them actually does, but I'm glad that you guys are picking up on that before we even got to it. Okay, so we've seen the timing diagrams for spin echo. It will show us a 90 degree excitation pulse. If it's just a spin echo, you'll see the 180 rephasing pulse, and then you'll see a 90 again, 180. Remember spin echo, 90, 180, 90, 180, 90, 180, all the way through, right? Fast spin echo, 90, 180, 180, 180, depending on what your echo train length is set at. Then it'll start all over again, 90, 180, 180, 180, okay? Now we're going to look at the diagram for an inversion recovery. It starts with the 180, okay? Then the 90, Is this a spin echo or fast spin echo? Why? Because there's, right, 2 or more. It's considered a fast spin echo. All right. So, little review about relaxation. T1 recovery in fat is really quick, right? What are the T1 and T2 times of fat? Short. Yeah. Don't be hesitant. T1 and T2 times of fat are short. T1 and T2 times of water are long. That is law. I mean, that will never change, okay? That does not ever change. So, images that are T1 weighted are based, obviously, on T1 differences. To exaggerate T1, obviously, we want to exaggerate and measure T1 differences between tissues. So, spin echo images are based on partial saturation. That ultimately ends up with a higher transverse magnetization. Therefore, fat on T1 is bright. Okay, that is why. Total saturation, when you start with the 180 inversion pulse, it's going to flip the NMV. What is the NMV? Net magnetization vector, which is the signal from the patient. It's going to take the NMV and push it past the transverse plane, or Z, completely past it. Okay? That's the start of an inversion recovery. This will exaggerate the T1 recovery times of tissues. Each tissue will recover to equilibrium at its own rate based upon its T1 time. Remember, every tissue has a specific T1 time that is unique to itself. It never changes. So once you push the NMV past transverse plane, then you come in and you hit it with a 90-degree excitation pulse. First of all, once it gets pushed past, it's got to come back up in order to get excited. Okay? So NMV gets pushed past. Some of the tissue, depending on its T1 time, will get back to the longitudinal plane quicker. So when that 90-degree excitation pulse comes down and excites the protons, some of them won't be all the way back to the longitudinal plane. Some of them may be here, or here, or here, depending on its T1 time. Okay? So when that excitation pulse comes down, some of them are going to get hit harder. Some of them are not going to get hit as hard. Does that make sense? Okay? You're not starting with them all up here and starting with the excitation so they all go together. They're going to get all pushed past. Some of them will make it back up. Some of them won't. Before that 90-degree excitation pulse comes down. It's all dependent upon its T1 time. Does everybody understand that? Okay, so TR and TE must be long enough to allow recovery of the NMV. This will allow full saturation of the entire NMV. TE can be longer or lengthened due to the exaggerated T1 differences created by the inversion pulse. Remember that inversion pulse pushes the NMV past the transverse plane. So when they come back up, again, they're not all going to get there at the same time. So we can alter our TR and our TEs based upon that. We can lengthen them. So your ETL also can be used to reduce scan time. Okay, so when we talk about inversion recovery, we talk about the 180 inversion pulse to start with, okay, then the 90, then the 180 rephasing. Depending upon what we want to null, whether it be fat or fluid or water, will depend on what we call its null point, okay? And each different tissue has its own null point. So when the 180 inversion pulse is applied, the NMV becomes fully saturated because it pushes all the way past, okay? during the TI interval, or the inversion time interval, recovery begins to occur in the longitudinal plane. The null point for fat, remember, the T1 and T2 times of fat are short, and the T1 and T2 times of water are long. So if we want to null fat, we want to use a shorter inversion time between 100 and 175 milliseconds. The null point for fluid, T1 and T2 times of fluid or water are long, so we're going to use a longer inversion time of inversion TI, approximately 1700 to 2200. So if you guys look at your protocol for your flares and your stirs, you're going to see, excuse me, on your flares that your TI is around 2000 or above. If you look at your stirs, your inversion time is going to be shorter, 100 to 175. Okay? Just remember, one thing that never changes, the T1 and T2 times of fat and water. That's the basis of MRI, right? So T1 and T2 times of fat are short. We're going to use a shorter inversion time, 100 and 175. The T1 and T2 times of fluid or water are long. We're going to use a longer inversion time to null fluid, a short inversion time to null fat. Does that make sense? Everybody's with me? It's really not that hard if you think about it. We all know the basis of MRI is the T1 and T2 times of fat and water.
How do you say the null point one more time, because I didn't follow, sorry.
The null point for fat is going to be between 100 and 175. It's going to be short. The null point for fluid or water is long, so it's going to be between 2000 and 2200. It's going to be up in the 2000s. So if we want to null fat, we're going to use a short inversion time. If we want to null fluid, we're going to use a long inversion time.
What is the null point?
To eliminate it, to null it, to get rid of it, to negate it, to eliminate it. Okay? So recovery happens, that happens during the TI interval. It occurs in the longitudinal plane. Nothing enters the transverse plane until the excitation pulse is delivered. Remember that 180 inversion pushes the NMB completely past the transverse plane. Okay? So the inversion time is the time between the 180 inversion pulse and the 90-degree excitation pulse. So nothing will enter the transverse plane until that excitation pulse. Remember, they're going back to the longitudinal plane at different times depending on the T1 time of the tissue. Okay? So nothing is in the transverse plane until that excitation pulse comes down. Is everybody with me? All right. So TI controls two things: which tissue will be nulled and the amount of T1 recovery that is allowed to occur. Stir are your fat nulling, or your stir sequences use the short TI to null fat. Fat will appear very dark on stirs, almost black, okay? It is null, meaning no signal from fat. It's gone. So if you look at a stir, the fat should be completely null. If you're using the correct inversion time. You have to use a short inversion time in order to null fat, okay? Fluid will be bright on a stir. You guys think about a stir in your head, right? Stir of the pelvis, pretty much all black, right? If there's any fluid, whether it be in the pelvic area or in the joint spaces, it's going to be very bright, right? Okay, so the image contrast depends on the T1 tissue differences. So a stir is a T1 weighted image. Okay? And what do we use stirs for? Pathology, impression fractures, right? Metastatic lesions, okay? Flare has to do with the nulling of fluid. So stir is for nulling fat, flares were nulling fluid. Flare sequences use the long inversion time, 1700 to 2200. A lot of T1 recovery occurs during the TI interval before the excitation pulse is delivered. Flare images, however, are not as heavily T1 weighted. TE can be adjusted to create a proton density or a T2. So when you're talking about stirs, they are T1 weighted. Why? Has to do with the inversion time. When is the inversion time? What is the inversion time?
It's the time between
It's the time between
180
the 180 and the 90. Okay? So the inversion time is short, so most of them get back quicker and you get more T1 magnetization. Okay? You get more T1 recovery. With a flare, we're using the longer TI, so there's more time for them to get back. Not everything's going to get back, and it's going to be more of a proton density or a T2 weighted image. Stirs are T1, flares, proton density T2. Stirs null, fat, flares null, fluid. When do we do a flare?
pathology.
Why? Why would you think? Why is that?
There would be vessels to it.
The MS plaques, MS lesions, where are they found?
Around,
We know that.
usually around the corpus callosum. No?
The white.
So, yes, there are some in the CSF, there's some in the white matter, but if you null the fluid, especially nulling the fluid in CSF, nulling the fluid would be nulling the CSF, these little MS plaques will show up.
Right.
They'll be bright, okay? Does that make sense? Stirs, T1 weighted, nulling fat, short TI, inversion time, okay? Flares, no fluid, long inversion time, proton density T2 weighted. Okay? Good? So inversion recoveries are really not that hard, right? Everybody understands it. 180, inversion pulse, takes the whole entity past the transverse plane, okay? Depending on your inversion time, how long it takes, how long the tissues are given to get back to longitudinal before that 90-degree excitation pulse gets delivered, okay? But nothing is in the transverse plane until the 90-degree excitation pulse gets delivered. Flares and stirs?
So flares and stirs will both always start with the 180.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Stir. You're going to see IR. Flare, stir, you see the IR? Okay. So flares, to null fluid, stirs, nulling fat. T1 and T2 times of fat are short. Inversion time to null fat is short. T1 and T2 times of water or fluid are long. Inversion time is long to null fluid. Good? All right. Let's review our gradient echo. And then we're going to add a few more things to gradient echo. To confusion. I don't want anything to confuse you guys. If you don't understand something, ask. How many of you have read the chapter?
Chapter 5.
Did it like,
Um,
are you good with it? It talks about coherent and incoherent. Okay, so that's gonna be our new spin tonight, but let's review a little bit about gradient echo. We're gonna have tests next week here in class. It'll be parameters and trade-offs, and then spin echo and pulse sequences. Spin echo, gradient echo, inversion, okay?
All this stuff?
All this stuff, all this stuff. Like the PowerPoints are parameters 1, parameters part 2, spin echo, and gradient echo. Okay, so a little review for gradient echo. Gradient echo uses a variable flip angle. What does that mean? Your excitation pulse, your flip angle is less than 90 degrees. It allows for a significant reduction in TR, which allows for faster scan times. However, what do we lose when we go from a spin echo to a gradient echo? Yes, signal. Okay, why? Why is there a significant loss in signal between the spin echo, fast spin echo, and the gradient echo? Why?
Push it fully into the,
Why?
because it's less than.
What does a gradient echo use to rephase?
Gradient of opposite polarity.
Exactly. So that gradient of opposite polarity does not push that unwanted signal past the transverse plane and out of our field of view. But sometimes we want that, right, Marlon? When do we want that?
Blood.
Very good. Very, very good. Okay, so variable flip angle uses significant reduction in RTRs, uses frequency encoding gradient to rephase the flip. Okay, it uses the gradient of opposite polarity. So a gradient can rephase the flip faster than the RF pulse. However, gradients do not account for magnetic field and homogeneities. This means that all gradient echo images are considered T2 star weighted. What is T2 star? What's T2 star? Correct. It includes the inhomogeneities of the field because it cannot be compensated for. So therefore, whenever we're doing a gradient echo, it's always considered T2 star because we have that extra signal from the magnetic inhomogeneities. Parameters in our gradient echo, our image weighting is also dependent on our TR, our TE, and now our flip angle. Because remember, when we do a spin echo, what is our image weighting dependent on? TR and TE. Why not flip angle? Because it's 90 for every single one. Very good. So with the gradient echo, our image weighting now is dependent upon not only TR and TE, but our flip angle. TR and TE will, TR and flip angle determine the amount of saturation that's allowed to occur. The more saturation, the more T1 weighting. So if I want a T1 weighted gradient echo image, give me my 3 parameters, my TR, my TE, and my flip angle.
Short TR, short TE, large.
Large flip angle, very good. If I want a proton density weighted gradient echo, what are my parameters?
Long TR.
Long TR,
Short.
short TE,
Small.
and a small flip angle. if I wanted T2 weighted gradient echo or T2 star weighted, right?
Long TR.
Long TR,
Long TE.
long TE,
Small
and a
flip
short or small flip angle. Very good. Now this is just this part here to review, right? Right? All right, so T1 weighted uses the large flip angle with a short TR and a short TE. Large flip angle will create more transverse magnetization. Shorter TR will prevent full recovery of NMV. T2 star weighting. T2 becomes T2 star as the gradient cannot account for the inhomogeneities. Use a small flip angle. Remember, even though we're saying large TR and large TE, they're still significantly short. Okay? They're still significantly short compared to what we use in spin echo, right? So like in spin echo, if we wanted a T2 weighted image, we would use, let's say, a 3000 TR with an 85 TE. When we go to gradient echo, our TRs, again, are significantly shorter, but they're longer than a T1. Okay, so they're going to be like in the 200 range. Does everybody remember that from last semester when we went over gradient echo? Okay, so small echo allows recovery to occur quickly, so the TR can be short. It's not going to be up in the 2,000-3,000s. Okay, the long TE, which is not going to be the 85, it's going to be shorter, but it's going to be longer than a T1. Proton density, small flip angle, short TR, short TE. Bless you. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about steady state. I don't want you guys, I don't want it to completely absorb your mind and drive you crazy. Basically, steady state occurs when the T1 and T2 times of the tissue are shorter than the TR. That's what steady state is. So don't let all of the wording confuse you. Steady state occurs when the T1 and T2 times of the tissue are shorter than the TR that's used. Like, you gonna say something?
No, you're just going a little fast.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so most all gradient echo sequences use what's called the steady state to achieve the shortest TR and CN time. The T1 and T2 times, remember, of tissue are constants. They don't change. If TR is shorter than the T1 and T2 times of the tissues, steady state occurs. So what's the definition of steady state? When the T1 and T2 times of the tissue are shorter than the TR that's being used. Simple. Okay, don't let it create all kind of craziness in your head. So this will mean that the NMV will be made of longitudinal and transverse magnetization at the same time. When we do